Are we rolling this? What's up, guys? It's McKinley Crain here, and today I'm going to be doing my spoiler-free review of WandaVision Season 1, Episode 6. So, if you didn't already know, WandaVision is a new Disney Plus series. It takes place in the MCU. It's an MCU show. And not just like a show that takes place in the MCU, but doesn't really reference the movies a lot, like the Marvel Netflix shows. This is actually like a mainline MCU show. Meaning that this show is about a character from the movies. And it's in every episode they reference the movie. Well, not in every episode. Actually, yeah, I think in every episode. There are a lot of references to the MCU movies and stuff like that, and the Avengers. Anyway, so this was episode 6 of season 1. So season 1, episode 6. And it once again stars Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, and Paul Bettany as Vision. And they're, as usual, they're both perfect in this movie. Not in this. This isn't a movie. As usual, they're both perfect in this episode, just as they've been for the whole series so far. And I love their chemistry. They have great character chemistry, perfect character chemistry, and I love their characters. Their characters are very, very deep characters. You care about the characters. You care about these characters. You love these characters. These characters are very fleshed out, and we can easily understand their motives. And these characters are awesome. And when I say these characters, I don't just mean Wanda and Vision. I mean every single character in this show is awesome, is perfect. And yeah, so moving on, this episode co-stars Evan Peters as Pietro, aka Quicksilver. Yeah, so I was originally gonna keep that part hidden, the whole Evan Peters thing hidden. Which is why I didn't really talk about it in my review of episode 5, because I considered it a spoiler, but everybody knows about it now. Everybody and their dog knows about it, and in the ads for this show, he's in there. They show him in there. Not in every ad, but in one or two ads I saw for this show, a couple days ago, or yesterday, I don't know, recently. I saw him in there. So basically, everybody knows that he's in here. He is playing Quicksilver, essentially. But you're probably wondering, is he playing his Quicksilver from the previous X-Men Marvel Fox X-Men movies? Or is he playing a completely different character? And that hasn't been answered yet. They've there's been evidence in this episode and the previous episode that he might not be just a complete recast of Pietro or whatever. And then there's been some evidence that he could just be just a random guy who wanted to recast as Pietro, as a brother Pietro, in her little sitcom show. And everybody knows that by now. Everybody should know that Wanda. This is in the trailers too. The most recent trailers too. That Wanda has something to do with what's going on, and yeah, she's controlling a lot of what's going on. Everybody should know that by now because it's in the trailers. Anyway, I can't answer all the questions, the series questions though, because spoiler-free review, and a lot of those are spoilers. Anyway, but he's perfect in here. He gives a perfect performance in here. He's a very fun, likable character, lovable character. He's very witty. His dialogue is very witty. He's like a comic relief essentially. And he's very smart. He seems to know a little bit more about what's really going on than a lot of the other characters in this show who were kind of going through a similar situation he's going through. I can't really say what, because that'd be a spoiler, but you'll just have to find out by watching this show if you haven't already. Anyway, we also have like a side plot about the sword agents from the previous episodes, trying to basically get everything under control, like get what's going on with Wanda and Vision under control, and try to figure out how to solve the problem, this certain problem that's going on in this show. And they're great in here. Every single sword agent is great and very well played. Especially the three main sword agents, Agent Monica Rambeau, Agent Darcy Lewis, and Agent Jimmy Woo. They're all awesome in this episode and in this series. And I really love this episode. It's my favorite episode of the series so far. I know I say that every time, but the episodes of WandaVision just keep getting better and better by the episode. I don't know if it's going to stay that way forever, but, that's just the way it's been so far. Anyway, if you didn't already know, this episode is, it's partly a sitcom, right? It's partially a sitcom. Because, half of this movie's, not this movie, half of this episode's whole story takes place in, just inside a sitcom. Well, this sitcom is, late 90s and early 2000s themed. It either takes place in the late 90s or the early 2000s. I don't know which one. I originally, when I was watching this episode, thought that it took place in 2004. Because it's got video game, it's got early 2000s looking video games in there, people playing early 2000s looking video games in this episode. And, the whole style of the sitcom, of how the sitcom portion of this episode, played out, just reminded me of an early 2000s sitcom. And I saw in this episode takes place on Halloween. Well, at least it does in the sitcom parts, and in the sitcom that Wanda and Vision are stuck in this series and in this episode. It's Halloween, and they're the characters are walking past a movie theater, and so it's, and I noticed that, and I read what the movies were, and the two movies that were showing were The Incredibles and the Parent Trap. Now, the second I saw The Incredibles, I was just like, this has got to take place in 2004, because that's a 2004 movie. So I assumed it was the early 2000s. And then later, I was just like, after I finished watching the episode, I was just like, wait a minute. Did The Parent Trap come out in the early 2000s or the late 90s? And then I looked it up, and when I say The Parent Trap, I mean the remake, not the 60s one. And when I looked it up afterwards, it said that it came out in 1998. So basically, no one actually knows whether it takes place in the late 90s or the early 2000s. But it is implied that it takes place in either one. It could be either one. And I love the whole theme of this episode, the whole setting of this episode. And both stories / plots, in the main story / plot with Wanda and Vision in the sitcom. I love the setting, and it's very nostalgic for me. I was born in 2003, right? So yeah, I was born in the early 2000s. So yeah, I was alive in the early 2000s. And of course, I was born in the early 2000s. So of course, when you don't, most people don't have very many memories from when they're really little. But I have some memories from when I was a baby, if you know what I mean. And a toddler and just a little kid in the early 2000s. And when I say the early 2000s, I mean the early 2000s, 2000 through 2004. Let's just say that. Let's just count that. So yeah. But I was really young in 2003. I was a baby in 2003. I was 1 year old in 2004. So I was dumb, right? Because people that age are dumb because they're babies. So I obviously didn't know S about pop culture from 2003 and 2004, because I couldn't really even talk because I was a baby. But I was still alive then, and I'm familiar with pop culture from the year I was born, and I love it. And this episode made me very nostalgic, and this was a very fun episode. And we get a lot more of Wanda and Vision's kids, 2 twin sons, Timmy and Tommy, in this episode, a lot more than we have in the previous episodes. And they're great. They're perfectly played. And I love this episode. It's a perfect episode of a perfect season of a perfect show. It's a perfect episode of a perfect season of a perfect show. And it's a very fun episode, and it's a very thrilling episode, and there are certain parts of this episode that are even more just intense than others, especially towards the end. And I love all the little twists and turns in this episode, and I love this episode's ending. I love what happens in the end, and I love what happens throughout the whole episode. This episode is just great, and it's perfect, and it's awesome. And the editing is great, the pacing is great, the editing is perfect, the pacing is perfect, everything in this episode is perfect. This is just a perfect episode of a perfect season of a perfect show. I know I've said that a couple times before in this video, but I have to keep saying it because this is just a really awesome show, a really unique, in a good way of course, and awesome show that if you haven't seen, you need to check out. Anyway, I'm gonna give this episode a 100% out of 100%, which is the equivalent of an A+. Like, subscribe, join the notification squad. I will return.